my name is Lonnie Gordon, and I represent Malibu for safetech.org. And we are honored to have Theodora Scarrato with us today from Environmental Health Trust to discuss the questions that you have sent in ahead of time and any that might come in the chat box. Theodora is an MSW and is Executive Director of the Environmental Health Trust, which is a scientific think tank that publishes research and educates policymakers on environmental health issues. EHT scientists are among the leading independent voices calling for reducing wireless worldwide. Theodora directs the EHT programs, has published research, and coordinates scientific programs in the US and internationally with EHT's senior science advisors. She's co-authored several articles on electromagnetic field policy and is a lead policy analyst and researcher for the EHT database on international actions, which is the most comprehensive collection of information on policy actions on cell phones and wireless. She's had many articles published. She's presented at the National Institutes of Health, the New Hampshire State 5G Commission, the San Francisco Teachers Union, the University of California, San Francisco, the American Federation of Teachers, and several international conferences on environmental health. She's also helped coordinate the 2019 U.S. Medical Conference designed exclusively to train medical professionals on electromagnetic radiation, and she's on the board of PhoneGate Alert. And I'm so glad that you're teaching medical professionals about this issue because they need to know. Theodora is a regular contributor to radio and news broadcasts and has been featured on NPR, Dr. Nandi, NBC, Fox 5, WJLA, and in several documentary films. Her work was instrumental in the Prince George County school system taking action to address the long neglected lead contamination in the school's drinking water, and in the Maryland State Children's Environmental Health Protection Advisory Council actions to issue recommendations to reduce radio frequency exposures in the school setting. She previously worked with the Environmental Health Trust as Director of Educational Resources and Public Affairs, developing educational resources for communities and governments. She's co-founded several organizations, both locally and nationally, that address environmental health and safety concerns. And as a practicing clinical psychotherapist, her 2 decades of work with children and adolescents include directing an intensive special education therapy program in Montgomery County schools and working as a psychotherapist at an ADHD clinic. Her research interests include not only the effects from radiation exposure, but also the social, emotional effects of technology overuse. Thank you and welcome, Theodora.
Thank you so much. That's quite an intro, and I'm really honored to be working on this issue, to be speaking to all of you today, and thankful that Environmental Health Trust has been working for over a decade, well before I was involved, actually, on this issue of cell phone, wireless, and 5G. I did look at a lot of the questions that have been sent in, and there is such a fabulous variety that I found myself challenged, but I'm going to do my best to answer these questions about, what is 5G? What is wireless? What is an Ethernet? What are we even talking about when we raise this issue? I started on this issue. I was a social worker working with kids and families, and it was my work on with people who had been prenatally exposed to drugs, and my understanding of how vulnerable pregnancy is as a time of development, as well as children are in terms of environmental exposures, that got me interested in this. Because when I learned about the impact to the brain and all of this research and all of the money that industry has invested into this, and I dug in and ended up here in front of you today and working on this issue at so many levels. So let me share my screen with you first. And please do put questions in the chat and in the Q&A. I am also reading, I have a list of questions that Lonnie gave me too. And I realize there are people here who are totally new to the issue, and also people who are deep in who have questions. And I'm going to, again, do my best with that. So let me just get my screen shared. You can go to Environmental Health Trust, ehtrust.org, to learn more about our organization, which was started by Dr. Deborah Davis, who is a co-founder and president, Ronald Herberman, and Dr. Shervin Schreiber. Both Dr. Herberman and Dr. Shervin Schreiber have passed away, but have contributed so greatly to the formation of Environmental Health Trust as focused on environmental pollution, environmental impacts, and the importance of addressing these impacts to affect our personal life. And you can learn more about our scientific advisors who have published hundreds of publications on the issue of environmental risks, which have long gone unaddressed, and our health. So I've talked about myself. I'm going to skip over my bio. I will say in advance and hopefully say at the end, please sign up for our newsletter. It's on our website at ehtrust.org. That way you can stay connected with us and everything that we're doing. So one thing I should add is we are now involved in a major landmark legal action against the Federal Communications Commission, with 14 petitioners actually in children's health defense, and many individuals and doctors who are experts in the field. And that is about, actually I'll save it till after I talk about this slide, I just realized, but that is about our FCC regulations, our safety standards for cell towers, cell phones, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and also how we measure and test phones and all of these devices. But let me just start with something that a lot of people in California who are coming up to speed on this, maybe you're just learning about it. I think it's really important to be aware that SB 649 in the past was a proposed bill that moved forward in the legislature and was passed, but ultimately vetoed by the governor. And it was a small cell streamlining bill. And there was a lot of organization and action on this issue. We have a website page on Environmental Health Trust where you can see all of the letters by not just medical organizations and environmental health groups, but many other groups and cities opposed to this bill, which was streamlining the 5G and small cells in California that would have taken away local authority in relation to where these facilities are placed. Now, about half the states in the United States have passed these kinds of streamlining bills. And I can already tell from who's on the call that many people, some people are not from California, and you might be in one of those states where a streamlining bill is passed, which really further ties the hands of our elected officials in terms of where facilities are placed. I do understand that there may be another one coming down the pike, and I wanted to show this image too of local leaders. And we did this in our community in Maryland as well, showing, if you see those boxes around the people, there, in addition to the poles with the antennas, there are these electrical boxes that are affixed to many of the facilities that are being built, which can be quite large. There's an allowance. And these big boxes are ugly, not aesthetically pleasing, and can be placed right in front of your house. When it comes to 5G and wireless facilities, there are so many issues, so many things that bring everyone to the table, that creates these incredible coalitions of people concerned about the radiation issue, people concerned about bees, birds, trees, the environment and impacts, about property values, aesthetics, and so forth, which I'm going to talk about. Energy and consumption use too, which is another big nut in this issue. So wireless companies inform their shareholders of the risk, and potential future risk, but not their customers and not the residents who are going to be living near the antennas. This picture was sent to me by someone in California, actually, about this was in front of their house and could I help them? And we are sent pictures like this all the time on a regular basis by people who are wondering what they need to know and by people who've gotten sick from after having one of these placed in front of their homes. So Crown Castle in their annual report states, if the emissions from wireless handsets or equipment on their communications infrastructure are demonstrated to cause negative effects, potential future claims could adversely affect their operations, costs, or revenues. They do not have any insurance with respect to these matters. And that's because insurance companies have classified in many white papers, which we have on our website, the risk as high because of the long latency to tumors and the potential long-term damages and the litigation that's already in place. And they don't insure, so companies are self-insured. To me, this is one of the most important pieces of the puzzle, because if insurance companies aren't willing to take the risk, why would we take the risk?
There's a revolution on the way. It's the 5G revolution. Although some say this will be more like an experiment that will affect billions of people. 5G stands for fifth generation mobile services. The internet will be faster than ever. Downloading a high-definition movie will take mere seconds. By 2025, the European Commission is planning for all urban areas across the continent to have seamless 5G coverage. This will enable a new age in the Internet of Things. Smart driverless cars and smart hospitals, smart fridges, coffee makers, and even baby diapers. But what citizens are not told is that for this to happen, countless new antennas will be added in our neighborhoods, our workplaces, even in our homes. Are mobile communications dangerous? The scientific community is divided. Some experts maintain they are safe, others have serious concerns. In 2011, the WHO classified electromagnetic fields associated with cell phones as possibly carcinogenic to humans. And studies published in 2018 showed that when rats were exposed to such fields, it increased their risk of certain types of cancer. Even among those who believe the technology is safe, many admit that more studies are needed. And for 5G, there are almost no studies. Telecom companies themselves have noted that electromagnetic signals may pose health risks. So why are the EU Commission and our governments turning a blind eye? They cite guidelines established by transnational scientific bodies. But Investigate Europe has found that these bodies are closed clubs. People with dissenting opinions are not invited in. And a significant number of the scientists involved have received funding from companies with vested interests in the 5G rollout. There is no risk-free society. Other things we consume are also bad for our health, from alcohol to junk food. But if you don't want a hamburger, you can simply avoid hamburgers. With 5G, there is no opt-out.
One of the things that has been established through 9 years of field study of trees in Germany is that radio frequency radiation damages trees. And if you look carefully at the image before you, you'll see that on the healthy side of the tree, the exposures are almost 10 times less than on the unhealthy side of the tree. And it's almost as though the tree is trying to move away from the antenna located right in the far left side of the image before you. And this peer-reviewed publication made clear those that were nearest to the mobile phone base stations showed the most damage, the closer the tree was. 5G is an energy hog. It depends entirely on the world purchasing billions of new devices, many of which are questionable use. I mean, do you really need your washing machine to be able to talk to your refrigerator or your refrigerator to decide when to order food for you? There's a lot of questions that are being raised by energy economists, and as you see in this graph here, that the evolution of global energy consumption for digital devices is exponentially going to increase. And if you look carefully at these lines, you will see the worst case scenario has more than a doubling of energy consumption from this sector of digital devices by 2025 compared to 2010. Now that's a huge increase, and it's what's called the rebound effect. The increase in demand will swamp any improvement in efficiency. In addition, you have a massive environmental footprint because you'll need millions of new antennas, which require sometimes precious metals to be put in them, and billions of new wireless devices, which will create tremendous amounts of electronic waste. Electronic waste is a huge problem, and the demand will only grow. Birds and wildlife also are showing effects of this non-ionizing radiation. And many studies have been published, some by Albert Manville, who was formerly the chief of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for this topic of birds and wildlife impacts. And he has documented effects on breeding, nesting, and survival, and the ability of birds to navigate. There's something called the magnetoreceptor, a protein behind the eye of all navigating animals that have been studied so far. And this is interfered with by the increase in non-ionizing radiation. So bird health is affected as well. Finally, we have to ask ourselves, well, if there's all these problems, how come the United States isn't doing more? And unfortunately, as was documented 5 years ago by a Harvard University researcher, Norman Alster, at the time, the FCC remains a captured agency. The current and past heads of the FCC come from and will probably go back to the telecommunications industry. And while it's important to have knowledgeable people who are FCC commissioners, there are none of them right now, not one, that is truly independent of this industry. And as Alster said, this industry looks like tobacco today in their tactics that they have been employing to get information to people.
They're particular about the brand they choose. In a repeated national survey, doctors in all branches of medicine, doctors in all parts of the country were asked, "What cigarette do you smoke, doctor?" Once again, the brand named most was Camel.
5G can be a tremendous boom to California, but only if it can be put up quickly and easily.
Hayward Assemblymember Bill Quirk co-authored legislation that would make it even harder for cities like Piedmont to object to a tower.
You wouldn't have to go through the Planning Commission, through the City Council.
The former NASA scientist says he may resurrect the bill recently vetoed by the governor.
I know scientifically that putting up these cell phone towers is safe.
But the International Association of Firefighters disagrees. They began opposing cell towers on fire stations after firefighters complained of health problems.
These firefighters developed symptoms.
Dr. Gunnar Heuser conducted a pilot study on firefighters at a station with cell towers.
And the symptoms included problem with memory, problem with intermittent confusion, problem with weakness.
Heuser says their brain scans suggest even low-level RF can cause cell damage, and he worries about more vulnerable groups like kids.
So we found abnormal brain function in all of the firefighters we examined.
So, following lobbying by firefighters, Quirk and his co-author exempted fire stations from their bill, making them one place cell companies couldn't put a tower.
This is the first piece of legislation that I think anyone's aware of where somebody got an exemption because they were concerned about health. Did they tell you at all about the study?
All I know is that when the firefighters ask, I do what they ask me to do.
Because they're strong lobbyists?
Yes.
So if, say, school teachers and parents had a strong lobby and they asked you to pass something that would prevent these from going up in your schools, would you do that?
If I couldn't get the votes any other way.
Firefighter and cancer survivor Tony Stefani notes,
it's not only firefighters, it's the people that live in the general vicinity of these towers.
Current regulations don't take into account continuous low-level exposure from these small cells 24 hours a day.
More of these studies have to be done.
There are 230 scientists from 41 countries who have apparently reviewed more than 2,000 peer-reviewed studies, and they're calling on the World Health Organization to do more studies. They're not convinced that this is safe.
I think doing more studies is always a good thing.
Do you think that maybe you should consider putting a pause on legislation that speeds up these towers until there's definitive evidence that there is no harm?
We can do a lot of studies, and there are people right now, believe it or not, who are sure the world is flat.
Smoke clean with New Bel Air. Air clean tobacco.
So the 5G appeal is calling to halt 5G until safety is assured. There's also the EMF scientist appeal, which is signed on to by scientists who have published in the field of electromagnetic radiation specifically. There are many actions worldwide on this. In Italy, for example, there are 600 municipalities which have passed resolutions or actions to halt 5G until safety is assured. And I'm just going to share with you briefly some materials that we have available online. One is, we have it in color and also in black and white, a document just showing around the world what's happening in relationship to small cells and 5G. So when I'm talking about 5G, and when industry talks about 5G, we're often also talking about small cell facilities as well as more macro towers, because the network, the 5G network, relies on 4G in addition to the 5G antennas, because phones will go back and forth depending on what network is more active. And in the name of 5G, there's the densification of 4G and what is termed wireless facilities. Really, it's short cell towers with cell antennas. Some industry representatives will say this is 5G, we need the newest thing, and then they're putting in 4G, or they're putting in frequencies that have long been in use. So there's a lot of confusion around that, but you'll find, like, the ordinance that I think Malibu's working on is about wireless facilities, not 5G specifically, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that is always a challenge. Cancer, and I'm not going to go too deep into the science, because in looking at all of the questions that people have, it's about how can I protect myself? What can I do? We have peer-reviewed, published science online. I know your Malibu organization has this online as well. Research that shows DNA damage, memory damage, sperm and reproductive damage, synergistic effects, which is extremely important. That's the combination of known toxic exposures with non-ionizing electromagnetic fields, which then can create a tumor promotion effect or potentiation of effects, meaning if you're already near an incinerator or you have pesticide exposures, then you combine electromagnetic field exposures. There's research indicating that when you combine non-ionizing radiation with a known carcinogen, that there's increased tumors. And this is so important because it's really about what we're exposed to, our total body burden. I know that industry and when this issue is talked about, or when environmental exposures are talked about, people often talk about one exposure at a time, but we're exposed to several environmental exposures all at once. And it's, each person is different about what tips us over, or when our body can't handle it anymore and starts to become sick. So oxidative stress is a critical issue. The majority of studies that have been published looking at oxidative stress endpoints have found effects. And there was just a major report done by the Swiss expert group on this, Baroness, and we have that on our site. And it's also basically talking about research that has well been published. Well, oxidative stress can lead to a myriad of health endpoints, impacts to the brain, and if you already are medically vulnerable, can really impact how your disease unfolds. This report also talked about the vulnerability of the young and the elderly and the medically vulnerable. In the questions that I received, There was questions about impacts to birds and bees, and there's a great and growing amount of research that has looked at impacts to trees, bees, and insects, which is really important because we're going to be blanketing communities with these antennas placed very close to each other. And also, as I understand it, there will need to be more large macro towers to connect everything together. So the network is the quote unquote small cells, which is an industry term for the shorter cell towers, microwave emitting antennas, as well as macro towers, and then all of the devices that connect into it, the phones, the smart cars, all the smart things, all of these new surveillance cameras and other things that are being put on streetlights, utility poles, and new poles. There's a study that looked at people who lived close to antennas and far from antennas, and found that radio frequency radiation, the higher levels with the people who lived closer to the cell antennas, damaged the DNA. And they did this through blood tests of people living near antennas. We have a list of science on cell towers, science on Wi-Fi, science on related to 5G, and science on environmental effects. It's all on our website under the science tab. So I think the missing link is, for me, when I learned about this, I really wanted to understand, like, how did this happen? I mean, how in the world could this have happened? Even though I was well versed in a lot of prior environmental exposures from lead and so forth with my work in schools. But this report from Harvard Press is a really important one, Captured Agency. So I hope everyone is aware of this. It's from 2015, still very relevant, could be updated with even more examples of industry influence. And this report documents how consumer safety, health, and privacy have been overlooked, sacrificed, or rated due to unchecked industry influence. The FCC is termed a captured agency, captured by the wireless industry. And Norm Alster, the investigative reporter, documents how members of Congress have received millions from industry and how there really is no accountability or oversight. I think, as many people know, and this relates to our legal action, the FCC exposure limits were set in 1996 after the Environmental Protection Agency was defunded from setting safety standards that, set what is a safe level. This question of what is a safe level was never determined by a federal agency. Instead, we adopted limits by industry connected groups and industry field groups. And the science that was actually cited in our standards is from 10 years prior. They account only for short-term heating effects as being the primary effects that are addressed, not long-term cumulative exposures. And in our legal action, which you can go online and listen to the whole thing. We have a transcript online, Environmental Health Trust et al. Versus the FCC. In that, Judge Patricia Ann Millett is really asking numerous questions of the FCC. If you go to about minute around 23, you can hear the judges query the FCC with very pointed questions where they ask about the cumulative effects, and they ask about all these questions like, well, how do you know that there's safety? What documentation do you have? And what we could see in the record, there is not adequate documentation of safety. In fact, the FDA has a few conclusatory sentences in a letter, in a very short letter. And I think the American people deserve more than a few sentences with no documentation backing that there's been a full review of the science. Also, the limits that we have are, were not even made for birds, bees, or trees, or wildlife, or our natural environment. And they are absolutely inadequate to protect the developing brains of children and pregnant women. There has been no, the science didn't even look at or have data on impacts to the developing brain. And as I'm sure you've seen a lot of this on our website, this is an imaging study. It's from an imaging study looking at the absorption of the radiation into the brain of an adult and a child from a cell phone. The lighter colors are more intense absorption rates, and it goes from white to yellow to orange to red to purple to blue. Now, this is not like, you know, I had a marker or a Photoshop and made this. This is engineers who have developed this state-of-the-art computer modeling that looks at the absorption rates into the brain, into the body. This kind of imaging is done in a lot of studies on, like, what is a person's exposure when a laptop's on the lap? What is a person's exposure from a cell tower at various distances? And something that our scientists have published on is that children absorb proportionately more radiation from any one device compared to an adult with the same device. However, there's so many problems. This is, for example, a measurement which is based on heat. This is irrelevant to biological effects and non-thermal effects, which is also what our case is based on. This is another imaging picture from a European Commission funded study, the Sea Wind Project. And you can see in this case, this is a far field antenna. That's how the image is labeled, which would be like a cell tower antenna. And you can see that more of the child's body is the lighter color. They're smaller.
This cell phone emits the waves, while this one receives the waves. At the same time, I have a device that records the sound that the colony makes in the beehive. This is why it is connected to a microphone placed under the beehive. Look at the waveform there. The thicker it is, the greater the intensity of the sound. When the phones are active, the colony is disturbed, and as soon as the phone's turned off, the colony reverts to its normal noise.
So this is imaging from a study. How do bees absorb different frequencies? And in their study called Exposure of Insects to Radio Frequency Electromagnetic Fields from 2 to 120 gigahertz, published in Scientific Reports, they found that as the frequencies got higher, there was a higher absorption into the insect. So as the frequency matched the size of the insect, there was an effect where there's a resonant effect and a very high level of absorption. So 5G is going to utilize higher frequencies as well as the lower frequencies, but I'm shocked that we're even considering rolling out higher frequencies when there is this data on impacts to insects. So I'm looking at some of your questions here. Someone specifically asked about how the radiation could contribute to the decline of bees, butterflies, and other insects. And there's research that shows also impacts to bee behavior and signaling a stress response, to animals being disoriented and impacting their ability to navigate from magnetic fields. So I would urge you to go to our website where we have a list of citations if you want to review all of the studies on this. There's also research on trees, injuries to trees that are near cell antennas, which I know in my community, where we have a lot of trees. What about tree trimming? What will be the impact to the tree canopy? What will be the impact to the root system from all the digging? And who is going to be in charge of the cutting of the trees? And which should not be happening. I mean, there's areas where they are cutting down trees to put up the small cells, not just trimming the trees. And there's not a lot of oversight into this. In Washington, D.C., we had an 8-hour hearing on this. I live right near Washington, D.C. I was there. And the Sierra Club came out testifying on the impact to trees. We have their testimony online, but also an incredible amount. I had no idea that there were this many tree environmental organizations in DC. But I'm telling you, I think they were all there. And, the 8 hours was mostly people talking about trees and impacts to health, but actually, frankly, mostly trees. And this alone is like a whole nugget to address with this issue. This is a study that was more recently published where they looked at Austin, Texas, and they looked at the current small cell infrastructure in place. It's another kind of imaging study or has these power density maps. And then they looked at if they were to deploy a full millimeter wave network, what would the power density be? What would happen in the community in terms of the radio frequency radiation level? And they found significantly elevated levels of radio frequency radiation from the deployment of the full network. And the authors state, this suggests that 5G mobile networks cannot yet be classified as safe for the public and demand serious considerations before using millimeter wave communications for 5G networks, given the potential harm it could inflict on the public. So this is one of our fact sheets, and Katie Singer also has several letters to Greta, which you can find online, but on the issue of climate change, energy consumption, and 5G. So these networks, with all of these new wireless facilities, are going to increase energy consumption. 5G is considered an energy hog. Although they are trying to make them efficient as possible, the reality is there are so many new installations and so many new devices that it can't make up. Any gains in energy efficiency cannot make up for the sheer amount of new devices and the needs of the 5G small cells in a community.
Theodora, I have a question that is along those lines that one of our people asked. She said there are so many versions of the small cell antennas. How do I ID them? And where can I get information on the ones closest to my home?
Well, I think that's very important. And one of the needs in every city and every municipality is having full transparency on this very question. Why is someone asking this question? We shouldn't be asking it. It should be online. I should be able to easily ask my government, my local government, where are they right now? Where are they being proposed? And what's the process, without having to be the FBI. But at this point, I can tell you that I have done this myself, I'm sure many people on the call have, you have to just inquire, take names, call back. This is outrageous. And this needs to change. So first go to your elected officials and to your, if you're in a city, go to the planning department and see if you can find this out easily. In France and in several countries, you can find this out in a much easier fashion. You can also find out what the radio frequency radiation levels are near your home, but not in the United States, where we don't have any of those transparency regulations in place. So I would go to, also, you might go to your city council person who won't know. And it really depends on who owns the land where the pole is. If you're talking about, so if you're, in Montgomery County where I live, there's county-owned land, there's poles that are owned by the electric company. Then you have to go, you find out differently as to who owns the land that the poles are on. But I think this is something that every community should ask for, is like a website, a web page with a map that shows the antennas and shows the proposed antennas. we now have that sort of in Montgomery County, although it's not been updated or in any way that is easy to find. It's not fully available in the way it needs to be right now.
Our city's working on that. We're very lucky that they're doing that. And
They are.
to answer the question before, you said, are we working on 5G? When I first approached the city, I said, how many 5G installations are going in? And they said none, because they weren't called 5G installations. They're called small cell sites.
Right.
So that was, we are working on both.
That it's kind of like a moving target. So people talk about 5G to push a law that streamlines 5G, small cells. But then when you start talking about 5G, they say, oh no, this isn't about 5G. It's about other, I mean, it's kind of quite confusing, I think, at first. And this needs to be addressed. So, but remember that once you have a 4G, 3G, any antenna up by law, it's not too hard, I can assure you, to get a 5G antenna put on that facility,
Right.
because it's already considered a wireless facility.
Right.
So as an example, something that they did in our community, I'm sure they're doing it across the country, is talk about that they need a new wireless facility for police and fire and rescue. And we've got to have it for this need. But then that pole becomes a place where you can put the commercial antennas and all kinds of other stuff on that pole. And it's not really just being used for that need. And that's another layer of things that are happening across the United States.
That's called LA RICS here. 5G on steroid, 105-foot tower.
Wow. And do you have one up?
They're putting up two. They were both passed by the County Board of Supervisors, one on Decker Canyon right at a fire station, and the other one on Saddle Peak Ridge, which is too near residences, in both of them.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't want to get too far off our basics for people that were asking questions.
I'll go to some people asked questions about, actually, let me show you this. We have a lot of handouts. I think you had shared these and hopefully have these just on how to reduce cell phone and wireless radiation and going to basics. When it comes to wireless devices, you can reduce your time on them, increase your distance, know the fine print warnings, and actually I have a whole section on using wired. So swapping out wireless devices with wired devices. But I have this image because I just think it's helpful to understand, because this radiation is invisible. We can't see it. It's kind of like a light, like a spotlight. And the closer you are, the more intense the levels can be. The farther you are, the less. Now, I say this with the caveat that at low levels, there can be high impacts, especially to medically vulnerable people and to all of us. We are all affected by this radiation. The way I think of it, when I first learned about it, I was like, oh no, like it's everywhere. How are we gonna fix this situation? But I think of it now like eating healthy food. You know, it's like a journey. You make changes. You start with the things you can fix, and also try to, like at the very personal level in your home, you know, with your family members, like whenever I can reduce exposure, I absolutely do. But then we need to fix this at the policy level, at the federal level, at the state level, and at the city level, at the level of government, so we can have meaningful policy change. Because I'm sure many people on this call know you can take a lot of actions in your personal life, but then there's a lot of things that one can't fix because of laws that are in place that are unjust. But let me go over some of the personal changes, because there were so many questions about this. Everything from how do you feel about, well, actually, I won't talk about, I'll talk about electric blankets for a minute. I'm not talking about it in this talk, but with electric blankets, there is electricity running through it when it's plugged in. So we would recommend against using electric blankets that are plugged in. If you do need to use an electric blanket, you can pre-warm it, but then make sure it's not just powered off, but also unplugged. Something to be aware of with electricity and with all of everything I'm going to talk about now with devices is that as long as it's plugged in, it has electromagnetic, non-ionizing electromagnetic fields that are coming from it. So everything from electrical cord in terms of the extremely low frequency fields to like gaming consoles, say, which while they're plugged in and powered on, they're still emitting even when nobody's using them. So they're both exposing you if they're wireless while you're using them, but also when you're not using them. So I really have a lot of power strips, and I have these little things that I can click off power to things in the house so I don't have that happening. So just to be aware, because I was looking at a lot of your questions about how to reduce exposure and tablets and devices. Every device connects with a base station. So this is sort of like a basic. So you have a phone, it connects to the tower. This connection is a wireless connection, an information carrying wave, and it's a two-way. The tower is talking to the phone is talking to the tower. Whatever is in between is absorbing some of that radiation. Every device, like a laptop or tablet, is connecting to the Wi-Fi router. Sometimes you're connecting to the tower as well. And again, that's a two-way. The base stations are always emanating, trying to check in with their little, I think of it like a mother and a child, like, or a dad and a child. The toddler is always looking around. Where is my mom? Where is my dad? Are you there? Are you near? If you think of a young child. Similarly, not that devices are like children in any way in an emotional sense. I'm not trying to make them human, except to say that the device is always checking in with the base station. Even when you're not using it, the device is checking in. Are you there? Yes, I'm here. The cell tower is like, are you in my cell? The cell phone is like, yes, I am. Same with the laptop. So you might be on your laptop doing something, looking at your pictures that are uploaded on your device, but it is still transmitting wireless frequencies, connecting to the router. It's also checking in, kind of aware of what other wireless routers are nearby. So one quick tip is turn off those antennas whenever you're not using them until you get a hardwired connection, which I'll talk about. The cordless phone is always connecting to the base. Let's see, I have an example here too, which I'm sure you're familiar with. When I first learned about this issue, the first thing I did is stop using my cell phone a lot, and I started using my home cordless phone completely unaware that, because I hadn't read all the literature.
I didn't know either.
Yeah. But this is emitting all the time. It's kind of like a mini cell tower in your home. And the problem with it is, and in my case, I had it right near my computer. So I was on my computer, my hardwired computer, not using a cell phone, but this was exposing me constantly, just a few inches from my head. And then of course the cordless phone is connecting to the base. So also baby monitors are always connecting with the base baby monitor. All your Bluetooth devices are connecting with your phone. You can think of this like cigarette smoking, first hand, second hand, and third hand. First hand is the person with the device that is in close proximity to the body. Second hand is utilizing a device, but you're near other people who are receiving some of that exposure from the device, as well as, of course, what's connecting to it. And then third hand from the towers. And the problem with the 5G and 4G is that we really can't, we can do all the changes in the world, but if your home is near one of these antennas, in line of sight especially, there's going to be an exposure that's pretty challenging to address without an expert professional like a building biologist to help you. And many people end up having to move homes. So I also think addressing nighttime is a really easy way. I'm reading some of your questions about what to do and what's the first best thing to do. At night, and this is one of our first steps, is just unplugging everything at night. So, not having any screens, wireless electronics in your bedroom. And this is called a sleep sanctuary. Turning devices off at night with the understanding that the best thing is to have 100% wired connections, which I'll talk about. Have your cell phone powered on. Don't sleep next to your cell phone. I don't know if anyone watched well, I have teenagers and we watched the Google movie, A Day in the Life. If anyone watched that, it was emotionally, like, there was some really, wonderful to see people from around the world and all their similarities and differences. But I was struck by the amount of devices people were on, and also seeing so many people with the phone, sleeping next to the phone in the movie. It's part of the movie, especially with teenagers and adults. Get a battery powered alarm clock. This is solves a lot of problems if you have a battery powered alarm clock, because then you don't even have to deal with setting your phone on airplane mode with all the antennas off and all the irritating problems that can happen with that. Although that is also a way to do it. Turn your phone off at night with all the antennas off. But there are many antennas in cell phones, and I'll talk specifically about phones in a little bit. Don't have screens before bedtime. I know this is really hard. I'm unable to do this myself because I work so much. But if you can, get blue light filters, which I have on my screens. Don't sleep with your head near a utility meter or electric panels. Get an analog meter, not a smart meter. Lonnie, can you talk about the situation in California or in your locality related to smart meters? In Maryland, we can opt out by paying, but there are some challenges in our community. But what's happening in Malibu?
Well, when I tried to opt out of my smart meter, because I live in a condominium community and we all have smart meters, they said that I'd have to pay $75 a month. I have to pay to have it taken out first, and then I have to pay $75 a month to have someone come and read it manually. Now, I don't know what else I can do. That's the last answer that I got. I heard from someone that there was a way around that, but I don't know what it is.
Did you say $75 a month?
Yes.
That's astounding.
Yes. Southern California Edison. They're trying to make their money back from the fire.
That's astounding. I know there's a lot of smart meter groups, especially in California, get involved with. I mean, I think I'm speechless.
I will. We've just been working so hard in getting our city ordinance changed for the telecom that, this area is just, there's so much to do.
There is so much to do. That's why many hands make light work.
Yeah.
So I hope as your group is large and growing and people come together and get educated on this, you can address these different aspects. In our community, they were trying to make our water meters smart. And there was a lot of invigorated action on that. And we were able to end up with a halting to that program, actually. And that really, that was a many hands make light work situation where a lot of people got organized and shared information and educated the commissioners on this and the many aspects of smart meters, because they don't save money. They don't do what they are purported to do.
And they're dangerous.
Yes, and they can
explode.
There's fires, privacy, so many issues with smart meters. And there are also, there's articles about how smart meters are there's a use case for smart meters as part of the whole 5G, they call it the 5G ecosystem. I mean, the industry is capturing terminology, an ecosystem, digital ecosystem, as if, I mean, it's shocking, really. Get a corded home phone, a corded landline, for your home and if possible for your office. So I have a corded phone that we're not able to get a copper line here, but I do have it connected to my modem, which is hardwired. And there's a lot of tips and tricks on this. I also, if I text people, and I do need to text people for a lot of things, I do it online on my computer, which is hardwired with like one of those texting applications, because people who, the plumber and all, there are a lot of people who only text apparently. And so I had to figure out how to be texting people often.
That's a good tip.
Yeah, there's a lot of ways that a lot of what people do with their cell phone can be done with wired connections. Now, I'm not addressing a lot of the occupational health issues, which is another nugget, which I think is probably almost the most important nugget here. But whatever changes you can make at home, especially for your children, are important. Use a non-wireless corded mouse. If you have to use headphones, we prefer using the speakers that are corded keyboard. And if you must use a headphone, using the air tube, even for your wired, I'm talking about like your wired setup, but it's really better to have it in the air and not have it going directly into your ears because of impacts to hearing and so forth. Someone asked about cars. This is a huge issue. The American Academy of Pediatrics has as one of their 10 recommendations to avoid making calls in cars, elevators, trains, and buses, because the cell phone works harder to get a signal through metal and the power level increases. When you're in a car and you're traveling, the devices that are transmitting in the car and connecting to a tower are actually shifting what tower they're connecting to. So if you're on the highway, you know how you see one cell tower and then another cell tower and another cell tower. Every time you're going to higher power, saying goodbye to one cell tower and hello to the next one as the phone is moving through space. And that can increase the levels in the car as well. It's also metal. There's also all of these new wireless things in cars that, frankly, when I first got involved in this, did not exist. And now we have sensors and all kinds of other things. So there's a lot of conversation on this, and Dr. Joel Moskowitz has some really good articles on this on his website, Safer EMR. I also want to mention Physicians for Safe Technology as a resource as well to go to. But for every car model, there's, and I'm party to a lot of these conversations, like sometimes you can turn off some antennas, not all. You really need to have your meter and get information from all the people who are trying to research this and get the safest car possible as well. There's also magnetic fields in cars, which are an issue. But you can also, someone asked about this issue, pre-download instead of streaming music and videos. So when my daughters were being picked up by someone to go back and forth from school, and they like to play music, and she previously would use her cell phone and stream music, I said, well, can't you just pre-download the songs and play it that way? Which actually, as it turns out, was pretty easy to do, to play music that's pre-downloaded. Spotify, for example, has pre-downloaded playlists you can use. So there are many ways to not have to always be streaming. If you're going on a long car ride with your kids, I know we're not doing that a lot now, but don't have the streaming device, especially not the device on the lap. Have things be pre-downloaded. I have been there on 20-hour car rides and not on the lap of the kids, because there's also magnetic fields that can come off of devices. All devices should not be on your lap, even when the wireless is disabled and the wireless is off, because of the magnetic fields. There's actually several kinds of non-ionizing radiation that comes from devices, not just the radio frequency radiation, but also magnetic fields and electric fields. So always have a device on a table. I wanted to also point you to the Baby Safe project for more information, especially related to pregnancy. This has an appeal signed by over 200 scientists, physicians, educators, and experts on recommendations to protect the pregnancy and developing brain. Avoid carrying your cell phone on your body, like in a pocket or a bra. Avoid holding devices on your body, and so forth. People asked about virtual assistants. What about virtual assistants and like Alexa and so forth? So all of these devices are like the this cordless cell phone base station. They are emitting constantly, waiting for you to wake them up and ask them a question. And they are connecting to the Wi-Fi router, as well video gaming consoles and wireless speakers. So we recommend wired connections for speakers. Right now, I do not know of any virtual assistants that do not employ wireless technology or that can be turned off. So we don't have this in our home. And, if someone wants to do a petition calling for a wired virtual assistant, please do, although there are privacy issues as well. So that's a whole other nugget right there. But I also have in this slide something that many people are not aware of, which is that in the fine print warnings in all devices actually, but also for virtual assistants, it says that the device should be installed and operated with a minimum distance of 20 centimeters between the radiator and your body. Now I have, and we presented on many pictures of children and babies hugging these devices, which are singing to them or telling them stories. And the parents don't know that it is emitting radio frequency radiation. And then with the devices touching your body, you can actually receive levels of exposure which exceed government limits. This 20 centimeter distance here is not a safe level. It is the level that the government, the Federal Communications Commission has as their allowable limit, but it is not safe. But yet, even if it were, it's being exceeded in many instances because people are completely unaware of this.
Right.
I wanted to just look at, to talk about, actually, I'm not going to go into that one right now. Because, well, this slide is about how to get eliminate radio frequency from a modem router, but actually it really depends on what modem you have, what router you have. Right now, I think we're coming to a point where a lot of people coming onto this issue have routers where you can't fully eliminate the radio frequency. You have to get your own router or really go in depth with the router that you have. So, because the new ones that were being sent are modem routers and it's hard to turn off all the antennas unless you have a meter. I really recommend getting a meter. I have two here to show you that I use, Acoustimeter and a Safe and Sound. That way you can verify if your modem or router is turned off. So the first thing we did when we learned about this issue and I went to Hardwire is I went to our router and I connected Ethernet. Someone asked, what is an Ethernet? I'm going to actually show you. So an Ethernet is a cord with an end that looks like this. And you can plug one end into your router and then the other end into your computer. If you don't have a port that looks like this, you might need an adapter. So this is the adapter that works for my my Apple computer. You put this in, then the USB can go in. There's also adapters that have different ports for your different. Here's another adapter that actually works for an iPhone too. You have to find out what kind of computer you have and what port you have, and get an adapter if you don't have an Ethernet port. A lot of the older desktops do have Ethernet ports. So once you connect with the wire, this will ensure that the radio frequency radiation is going, or the information is going through the wire, not in the air that the computer is receiving. But you have to take some additional steps. You have to remember to go to the device you're using and turn the wireless antennas off of your device, like your laptop or your computer, or else even though you're using a wire, and I do not understand why it's programmed this way, you're still going to be getting signals off the laptop or the iPad. And by the way, this works for an iPad as well. They're depending on your iPad or your tablet, you need to get the correct adapter to connect to the Ethernet. I find myself, I know a lot about this issue, but I am on the phone with manufacturers all the time trying to figure out how to solve the many problems in my life and my family members' life related to safe technology. So you're not alone when you're on the phone trying to figure this out. Then the other thing is that you want to turn if you're completely set up with wired connections, turn the wireless antennas off your router or your modem / router, if it's a combined one. And that is different for everyone. I found some of the old styled routers people have in their homes, you just press a button. It's an exterior button and it goes off. But more and more, you have to go internally into, you can do it if you're connected with a wire and actually turn off the antennas. But even then, sometimes they're not all off. And that's why you need a meter to verify that they're off, or you can call up your provider and find out how to turn the wireless antennas off. But just be aware that you want to make sure you have a wired connection first, so that when it goes off, you're not then don't have any internet for your next steps. We hired an electrician and we have wires in our home. So just like you'd plug in your electricity, we have plugs for of Ethernet. So let me take a few more questions here. There's a lot of questions. Someone wrote about ADHD symptoms in children. So there is a body of science that has found prenatal exposure as well as postnatal exposure to cell phones and radio frequency radiation linked to ADHD symptoms. Also magnetic fields, another type of non-ionizing radiation, which is actually a part of radio frequency radiation, because all radio frequency radiation has a magnetic component. But there's research out of Kaiser Permanente finding non-ionizing radiation measured in terms of magnetic fields related to ADHD, obesity, miscarriage in women who are pregnant or prenatal exposure. So miscarriage when prenatally exposed, and then in their offspring, obesity, asthma, and ADHD. And I'm sure, and I hope everyone's aware of Dr. Hugh Taylor's research, his team's research, looking at mice that found prenatally exposed mice had damaged memory and more hyperactivity if they were exposed to cell phone radiation.
I have a question here for you, Theodora.
Yeah.
What if a child is using a tablet? What can they use on their lap if they don't have it hardwired? Is there any way to protect that? If it's not on the table, but it's on their lap? A pillow?
Well,
anything?
The first step would be to really have it on a table. It should not be on, no matter how it's connected, even if it's hardwired, to have it on a table. With one thing you can do with tablets is have whatever the child is doing be pre-downloaded. I know someone asked as to what that meant, meaning not have it be connecting to a online program, but rather have a program that's on the device with the antennas turned off. So in other words, pre-download a movie so that the movie's already on the device rather than having it be streaming, or have a program where you're actually connecting online.
But you're still getting, at least from what I've tested on my phone, you're still getting the magnetic radiation, even if the Bluetooth, the Wi-Fi, and it's on airplane mode.
That's right.
If I play music just on my phone, I can get up to 12.5 on my meter, and that's not good. It should be like 0.2.
Any electronic, anything plugged in that's utilizing power or has a battery is going to have magnetic fields and should not be on your body or on your lap. I mean, it's unfortunate that they call them, that tablets are being marketed to kids on their laps when they have non-ionizing exposures, even with the wireless antennas off. That's like, there's actually, I think of it, well, there's more than 3, but I'm going to summarize and say you have the wireless radiation, the extremely low frequency fields, and then you have the blue light from the device. So we also recommend having a blue light filter and really minimizing use for kids to, right now, I mean, my gosh, I think kids are on devices 12 hours a day or more. So all of these things we should have, like, the devices should be safe. They should be manufactured as safe. Then there's addiction, which we haven't even talked about, but is a whole part of this. And I am a parent. I know I'm right there. I'm right there in the struggle of the screens and time spent on screens. And it's really a challenge, but it really shouldn't be on the lap. That's why we need a bit of a lifestyle revolution. Like, we gotta just, go all the way, because I know that when my kids go to other people's houses, like, people don't do all the things that they do at our house, and it's kind of challenging. But the more people do this and talk about it and get educated on it, it sort of makes sense.
Education is the key.
Yeah.
One of the keys.
There's so many keys, because even when we're educating on it, right, it's like people aren't changing. It's too inconvenient. So we need to pressure companies as well to make safe technology that's not addictive, where the blue light is already addressed, where, why is it so hard to turn a wireless antenna off of a device? It should just be like, oh, I want this thing and I want the device not to be radiating. I just want to, why is it so hard? I mean, I'm educating now. I can't just say turn it on airplane mode. I have to say, so for any device, you need to turn it on airplane mode. You need to make sure that the Bluetooth is off, that the location is off, that any other cellular or LTE is off. It is no longer, airplane mode is no longer good enough, because many of the models now have these software ways that they work, that the antennas pop right back on. You can even click on like a wireless application on your device, even though it's on airplane mode, and then it triggers the antennas to turn back on. Well, why is that? Like, I, the mom, wanted it to be on airplane mode, and I, the mom, should be like, airplane mode, everyone down, but it's not that simple. And that's why we need to support policy change and put pressure on industry to do the right thing here. They will. When there's enough people clamming on the door, calling for safe technology, they will. They already have marketed, they've already patented different technology to reduce radiation or reduce different biological impacts, or so they have attempted to. So they're very well aware, and we fully believe that they are working on safer phones, not safe phones, because that's a whole other challenge. But they must all have a pinky swear, where it's like, one goes down, like, we're all going to go on this together, because once you have one, that's it. Everyone's going to buy the safer phone. But remember that it's
some questions in chat here. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm talking.
Check these while you're talking.
And remember, I also just want to say that a phone, even if you're reducing exposure, there still are exposures created, and it's exposing There's these ambient exposures that are being created by the phone network. So we don't know what a safe level is, and there is research showing effects at such low levels that the best course of action is to reduce exposure to as low as possible and to have wired connections as much as possible as sort of routine rather than wireless everything, including the wireless Barbie. I easily was able to order online, even though she's been taken down apparently because of privacy concerns.
I see that someone said, if anyone talks about the deleterious effects of microwaves, they're accused in general of being a conspiracy theorist. And how true that is. It's draining to work against this negative mindset of others so addicted to their devices. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's really hard. And I think that's where we just need to keep presenting the peer-reviewed published science, of which there is so much. I could spend all day, online countering statements like, this is just a conspiracy. There's no science. In fact, just recently, there's stuff happening in Bermuda now where they opened up an open public consultation on 5G, and now the regulatory authority just determined that there's not going to be a moratorium on 5G because there's no reason to have a moratorium on 5G. And online are all these statements attacking the credibility of the scientists who are calling for a moratorium. And I could post study after study. There was, that's why we have that web page, and we have several web pages where we just link to it. We have the name, the citation, so you can just share with them this science, because industry has really been working on coining people who are raising this issue as crazy or tinfoil hat or, worrying. You're worrying too much. But these are scientists from all around the world who, in their own research, you've got some scientists who just work on insects, some who are just work on oxidative stress, some on cells. They're publishing all of this science showing effects. I mean, how did that happen? Like, if it's so safe, why are there so many publications that show effects? There's a really good review article in the Lancet by Dr. Bandara and Dr. Carpenter, which summarizes the thousands of studies that have found effects and the need for action on this issue that has just been ignored for a long time. There was another article on children and precaution out of the UK, and I'm going to put in the chat while you read a few more questions, some of these links for people so they have them.
Okay. And I have to change my screen to be able to read this. She says, what do you think is the best way of going about safe zones for the extremely electrosensitive disabled who all this is killing? Either hardwire a state, a county, or have safe zones. I don't think that's going to happen very soon, but it's a good idea because there's so many people who are becoming so much more electrosensitive. And I know because I was, until I hardwired my place, I didn't know what was wrong with me. And now there are very few places that people can go where you aren't surrounded by it. I mean, I know if I turn on my Wi-Fi for just 1 minute because I have to send something Wi-Fi and then turn it off on my computer, I pick up all these Wi-Fi signals from around where I live. So we're bombarded by it all the time. And now with this thing with SpaceX and satellites, we're going to have more. So it was a good question.
Yeah, I think that this is something we're trying to address in our legal action as well. And there absolutely should be safe spaces. I think ultimately it's going to come to the courts. So there are, I know, lawsuits related to ADA that have been moving forward. There was just a win well, this wasn't related to ADA specifically, but in Pennsylvania, where they weren't allowing people to have an analog meter, where there was a court ruling that people didn't have to be forced to accept the smart meter. There's several cases, especially internationally, that have been successful related to people with electrical sensitivities, although we are all sensitive, but some people are having debilitating symptoms. They're overexposed and they can't live in their home. They can't even find a safe place to live because of the saturation of these frequencies. And this is a tragedy. It needs to be rectified. It is absolutely outrageous that when people raise this with their public utility or their school or their place of work, that they are told that FCC limits are the following, and there doesn't need to be any changes to accommodate them. Those accommodations need to be in place. That's why some communities are looking at making sure that the ordinance related to 5G or wireless facilities states that there needs to be compliance with the ADA.
Right.
I also know that there was a successful case, let me just pull it up, where it was a civil rights action that was initiated in the United States. This was it was a housing case regarding smart water meters, where a resident was provided a mechanical meter after filing in court and coming to an agreement with the water authority on this issue. And this person also was able to ensure that the neighbors of 3 properties nearby were provided free opt-outs for water meters. And I'm going to put in the chat a link to our page with a lot of resources as well on electrical sensitivity, also called microwave sickness or electromagnetic radiation illness.
There's someone that says they're new to this platform and they don't know much about it. Is there a documentary or a book that would help them get up to speed that you can recommend?
Oh, that's a great question. I actually made we put on our website films on electromagnetic radiation and health, and I'm going to put it in the chat right now. There are really a lot of great films. Generation Zapped, I think did you have a showing of that? Of
No.
Malibu or?
No, we didn't. I think Julie Levine Topanga did.
Okay, great. And then there's also, I have a list of films. Burt Wolf's A Short Guide to Cell Phone Safety and the Dangers of Radio Frequency Radiation, which we have on this list, which I put, is a really great intro, especially to people who are new to this issue or to highly skeptical friends and family who are new to the issue. There's also, if you want to dive in deeper, Thank You for Calling is a documentary that has a lot of, it's pretty deep into it, into the science and policy, as well as the film Microwave Science and Lies. Is an excellent film that really looks into the money behind these so-called authorities that are making decisions and calls out the World Health Organization. There's actually 2 entities of the World Health Organization. One is the International Agency for the Research on Cancer that deemed radiofrequency radiation as a class 2B possible carcinogen about a decade ago in 2011. And then there's the World Health Organization EMF project. And when you go to the WHO and you search cell phones, you are going to see these fact sheets that say there's no problem. And so in many words, many renditions about 5G phones, towers, and so forth. And this film shows the difference between them and also how the World Health Organization, those fact sheets that are online, there's no transparency in who wrote them. And the EMF project was started with industry funding. And there's one engineer who is sort of taking care of this whole program. And there hasn't even been a review by the WHO EMF project since 1993. So how you can say that there's no problem when there hasn't even been a full review. And the International Agency for the Research on Cancer that classified RF as a class 2B carcinogen, they had been advised by their advisory council that there needs to be another review on this, this exposure because of the new science that has been published on this issue. And I'm also going to put in the chat a link to a list of films on environmental exposures, which is all sort of the same picture, because the way that lead or chemicals or plastics, all of these toxic agents, the way the issue has been war gamed is really the same story with cigarettes. It's the same story. It's just here we are with non-ionizing electromagnetic fields. And there's some really great films on environmental health as well. I'll put that in the chat.
Great.
So when was the EPA defunded? 1996 was kind of the final straw. There was actually a slow defunding happening in the 90s, maybe a bit earlier, but there had been a very robust research program in the US government, both in the EPA and in other federal agencies, because of the need for, development of standards and also military usage. And there still is quite a program related to electromagnetic fields, because the Defense Department, there are weapons that use electromagnetic radiation, and there's a whole history there. And they even coined a lot of the issues related that when we talk about what are the symptoms of electromagnetic sensitivity, like headaches, cognitive issues, rashes, hearing. Oh yeah, hearing.
Tinnitus.
Yeah, tinnitus. That was all documented in reports from the 70s by the US government, and actually earlier.
There's a question here, and I don't know how to answer this. We can't get a corded landline here in Malibu anymore. How do we address this?
Well, we can't get a corded, a corded landline. Does that mean landline?
I think
Yeah.
landline.
So we can't either here, even though we should, because we paid as customers to have corded landlines. But what you do is through our modem, our cable connection, or the DSL, you get a phone line that way. That's one way you can do it. It does cost more to have that phone line. So I have a modem that has a phone line as well as an Ethernet port. So I get my Ethernet, internet, and a phone line. There's also different, I think it's called, oh my gosh, is it called UMA? I don't want to put
I know what you mean.
company, but there are companies that you hook the Ethernet into this device, which turns it into a phone line. You just have to make sure when you do that you're getting, and there's like a fee for the device, and then a monthly fee that could just be like $5. Just make sure that whatever you get doesn't have wireless antennas in it. So you want to make sure that when you get the thing that you plug the Ethernet into, that it's not a wireless transmitting one. This is harder and harder to do these days, but you just have to hang on the phone and wait on hold and talk to a person.
There's a question on how to affix a timer to a router. I think that having the remote switch, I think that's what you said you have, and that's what I have, to turn off the router. You just plug it into if she says a timer, or he, how to affix a timer to a router.
Some people will use a Christmas timer or something onto the router. But I actually have, so my router is fully, at first at night I would turn the router off, and then I got the Ethernet cords. So my modem is completely hardwired. But what you're talking about, what I was referring to was for my electrical things, I have this little switch. I'm afraid I don't have an example. I have to go into my daughter's room. She has an electric piano in her bedroom, and that's a problem because it's electricity. I try to have no electrical cords near the bed. They have magnetic fields, but it's this little, it's like about this big. You plug it in, and it has a switch at the top. So you can turn it on and off with the switch rather than have to unplug the piano. So you can get like a timer for the router, or what we were doing was just every night we just be sure to unplug it. And I have to say, when we made the switch to wired Ethernet, at first when I thought about it, I thought it was like too hard to do. It was like, oh my gosh, how would I do that? Like, what is even an Ethernet cord? I mean, I was right there. Like, I didn't know. I am so thankful we did it. It was like easier than I thought. And it's also faster. You don't have the dropping of the, like right now, if I was on Wi-Fi, it'd be dropping out. My computer couldn't handle it. The network couldn't handle it. And this way, it's really faster. So it's really worked well for us. So I say just bite the bullet and, check it out, see how it goes, for you. I had a wire, actually, I still have a wire running through my house because my husband, because of COVID, he moved into our closet. So he's in the closet and, and it's an Ethernet cord that goes into the closet and it goes all the way to the bottom floor.
It's funny.
That's just what we ended up doing. Someone said, can you repeat your texting on the computer tip? Why is it safer than texting on your cell phone? Oh, that's a great question. So first of all, in terms of your phone, you can think of it like, what's the highest radiation and the lowest radiation? So highest would be you're streaming a video on your phone. And if you saw that picture of the woman who had the streaming video on her head like that, because she was changing her baby's diapers, this would be like a worst case scenario for exposure into your head, one of the many, or virtual reality where you have a phone and a thing up to your eyes. Streaming video, streaming music. Then if you have the phone to your head, you're getting a lot of exposure. If you're texting, that is less exposure than a phone call. However, it is still transmitting and connecting in. So if you can, as much as possible, have that phone turned off if you can and use a wired computer. So because my laptop is wired with an Ethernet, and my Wi-Fi is off, I will put in the link to what I text with. Now, I think there might be some privacy issues with it, but it's what I use. It's called textnow.com. I use that, and that way I don't have to text with a wireless device. I also use this thing called Messages. I'm sure everyone uses this in the world. I just learned about it. It's like an Apple thing that you can message with other people, and that's all on the computer. So I don't need to go to use a wireless device. Also, you can take your an iPhone and use when my daughter comes to visit, she has an iPhone, so we use this in the house. So the phone is not on in the house in our home, and we have the phone connected to it, and then this connects to the Ethernet. And I know that Robert earlier, and I need to get this written up, had shown me how you can actually connect your phone by a USB and a special adapter into the computer. And if the computer is connected to an Ethernet, then you can do a lot of the applications on your phone without having to actually have the wireless on. So I hope that answers the question about the texting. Plus, this trick is a really good trick for most of the things. You just connect this is actually an iPod, but it looks like an iPhone. It doesn't work. It's not on into this. And then you can do like Instagram. Not that I am recommending these things, but there are people that like have to have it. And I know about the battles, and this way, at least there's not the radiation. At least I'm not going around with my meter going, can you turn that off? Because I'm getting a headache, and it's just, so I like to have all these things available. Is there a way to, I'm trying to read more questions here that might be.
Are you in the questions online or the questions that I sent to you?
Oh, I'm looking at the questions in the Q&A as well. I haven't even looked at the questions in the conversation.
Someone's asking, would you discuss digital detox?
Oh, yes. So for me, well, you can think about this overexposure to digital devices and everything that we're being exposed to, from the radiation to the imagery, this digital world, and how it is affecting us emotionally as well as physically and socially. So digital detox is a term used in many different ways. There are kids where we really need to turn the screens completely off and find that their symptoms of hyperactivity, agitation, or neurological issues are actually calmed down from a detox from screens. There are adults who are going on camps, digital detox camps, to better find themselves and to settle down and to find a more stable self. So digital detox is used in a lot of ways, but people are finding that we need to detox from this digital world to feel better. There's so much, even with all the reducing the wireless and eliminating wireless from screens, there are other issues with screens around addiction and, just overuse, disconnecting from people, even though it feels like we're connecting, lacking, our creativity, I think, is being stifled by all our screen use. And the many people who are developing this technology and who own, who have made this technology, don't let their kids use the technology until their kids are older, like Steve Jobs and so forth, and who are sending their kids to schools where there's less technology, because research shows that overuse of this technology in schools and education is not actually promoting those educational gains we're trying to get. In fact, it's having the opposite effect. I know that, the research has shown in countries where they looked at different countries and different programs of tech in the schools, that the just because you have a lot of technology does not mean the kids are going to learn better. In fact, they're showing the opposite, and that kids who, or actually they did a study, the Princeton laptop study, where they looked at students who took notes on a laptop and notes on a pen and paper, and found that those who were not using the laptop did better on tests, because most likely what they hypothesized is that they're processing the information, thinking about it, turning into these, summarizing it in notes. And all of that's happening. It's like the hand-body connection that is so we've done for so long. Whereas on the laptop, you're just root. It's just root. You're just going through your head. You're typing out exactly what it is. It's not being processed in our brains. So that's like a whole nother nugget, is wireless in schools, tech in schools. So digital detox is important. I know I feel better. People are having like one day a week when they turn everything off, and finding it brings more connection to their families and they feel better.
I wanted to ask you this one that I seem to have lost. When I saw the Costco magazine the other day, and they were touting the use of gaming for seniors because it's so good for their brain. And I think so many kids are home now, people are home now, and a lot of people do gaming. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I before I even started understanding about wireless, I had a lot of kids with ADHD and severe behavior problems who were addicted to gaming. And I didn't know much about it at the time. This is many years ago. This is when gaming was first starting. But there is a body of research showing changes to the brain from gaming. It gives you dopamine hits. I know I have worked with clients that were addicted to gaming, even after I'd learned about this, and who were also a lot of other emotional challenges, but I have not found gaming to be helpful, especially with the teenagers. Now, I know that there also is some science showing certain endpoints being better with gaming, and I wonder if that's what they are going for. But I imagine that playing an instrument, learning, connecting with people through words and face-to-face interaction is a way to sharpen your brain, and all of these exercises, mind-body exercises, physical movement. So I have real concerns about gaming being promoted.
Well,
People.
since they are promoting it, and people will be buying it, I'm sure. Do you think if it's wired that it's, obviously if it's wired, it's safer. I don't know if it can be wired, but it has to be turned off when they're finished with it, correct?
Well, I would always recommend, having it be wired.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I just thinking learning to type. My daughter used a gaming program for that. And it really, I would have to say, she loved it. She wanted to get on and, learn how to type. And I think it helped her. And that would be an example of a positive use of the technology. So, I mean, I'm really concerned about the teenagers and the kids with gaming. So and why is it always gaming for everything? I mean, I can't tell you how many parents I know personally and have worked with. They are completely overwhelmed with how to deal with their kids in terms of the gaming. They're gaming during virtual school.
I'm just reading some of the questions that are in here. I'm getting mixed answers on using shielded Cat 5 or 7 cables, ground them or not. Yes, everything should be grounded.
Oh,
Cat 5 is the original one. They're now up to Cat 8. But Cat 7 are popular.
This is where I do recommend consulting with a building biologist or an electrician who is versed in wiring. We had quite of a complex issue that I don't think I want to go too much in, but it was all about the grounding and how to address this. I will say, if you have a laptop, I'm sort of going into the grounding for a moment, to get instead of it being a 2-prong plug for your laptop, get the thing that adds on to it. Like for my Mac, it was only like $6 more to make it into a 3-prong plug. Try to use it on battery rather than connected electrically. And there are things online you can learn about how to ground the Ethernet and so forth, but I do recommend consulting a professional, because you can also make a mistake with it and you can create a loop, and there's all kinds of issues around that. So if you're sensitive to electromagnetic fields, please get a professional, or I don't recommend just doing things yourself without really understanding what you're doing when it comes to all of this.
And there is a building biologist. Is it a foundation or organization? What is their last?
The Building Biology Institute?
Institute, yes.
Yeah.
They can refer people in states, I believe, can't they?
Yes, and they also have a great, I'm going to put the link in the chat. They have a great set of fact sheets and information, which a lot of it's free and downloadable. They have classes where you can learn more. I'm putting the link in the chat right now. It's buildingbiologyinstitute.org. And they also talk about mold and other environmental issues in buildings. There's a lot. This is like a onion, and it just, you start in one place and peel as you go, and take simple steps at first, and then, take it one step at a time. Something I tell people is, like, start at night, deal with nighttime. That's kind of super easy. And when you're not using stuff, and then take like an inventory in your house. Like, what do I have that's wireless? Make a list and figure out, what can you swap out? Where can you start? Take it one thing at a time, rather than how most people feel, which is like, what am I going to do? But in the meantime, because we're all superwoman and superman and super people, start talking to your elected officials because no matter what you do at home, there is nothing like an antenna outside your window. That is just a whole other ball game. It's nonstop. It's all the time. You can't turn it off, and it's happening so rapidly across the country. So everything we have now, it's like what we have now on steroids, is coming, and we've only just begun. I mean, all the wireless things that are being invented.
Oh my God, crazy.
Just wild.
I had to buy a new washer and dryer, and I couldn't find one that didn't have Wi-Fi. I'm not using the Wi-Fi, but they're all coming with Wi-Fi now.
I just went through that, and let me tell you, I'm on the phone with manufacturers. I went with a mechanical one. It is hard, and we have to, there's so many people in your community working on this. I'd love to see like a dedicated group just working on like, let's get these companies to make options so that we can get what we want, but not with all these antennas, like a refrigerator or the washing machine. I'm like, Doc, I do not want my washing machine to die because I don't know, like, how am I going to find one without the Wi-Fi? And even TVs have antennas that are hard to turn off. So this is ridiculous. Like, why can't we just flip a switch or buy one without antennas? It's a waste of energy too, that they're always pinging.
Yep.
You
have a lot of questions in there.
Okay, I'm looking more about these
expensive. I wonder what that was for.
Wait, which you can ask me if you're coming across one. I'm looking at this longer list here. Oh, charging. Should I disconnect my charging cable from the wall socket or USB when I'm done charging a device? I've heard it still emits radiation from the charging adapter. I can't believe I didn't mention this, but when a device is charging, there's higher levels of extremely low frequency fields. You don't want to use a device like a phone to your head when it's charging. And yes, you should unplug it from the wall or and I'll put in the chat, the little thing that I was telling you about where you can flip the switch and stop the electricity from moving through the cord. Have it like, in my perfect world, and I can't say I follow this all the time, but in my perfect world, downstairs in the kitchen table, that's where we should charge everything. On a table, not on your bed, where things can overheat and create fires as well. And my daughter's dear friend's family had a fire in their apartment from a charging laptop on a bed in a condo. This is not uncommon. You can just look it up. Also, these charging cords, there are kids who are putting them in their mouths and being electrocuted. And I'm not trying to scare anyone. I'm literally just sharing things that have happened. Or the charging cord, if you can imagine. Hold on here. The charging cord might be in your bed, your teenage, or maybe your bedroom, and it touches your necklace, which is metal, and then creates a situation where you get burnt. There's cases of people who are getting burns from metal jewelry. Haven't even talked about metal. It's a whole other nugget, but so
we need that 5 more hours.
Yeah, so charging, have a place for charging, solid table, and not in your bed, and unplug when you're not charging. And the more we use wired technology and safer technology, the less we will be charging our devices, actually, because it uses less energy. And they kind of go hand in hand. So, having power strips where you can turn off things that are plugged in is also a nice tip, so that you don't have things already on. You can just press that button and it turns off the electricity. A dear friend had me over with my meter. I'd already metered her house and helped her with a lot of things. So she has me over. She's like, Theodora, can you just take your meter out one more time? And I take my meter out, and I'm in the living room where the kids' puzzles are, and the level is so high. And I'm like looking around, I'm like, wait a minute. Well, she'd gotten, don't ask me why, she'd gotten a Wii. this thing. They weren't using it, but it was radiating all the time, this gaming console that was plugged in. So I said, well, this is wireless. And she said, I know. And I said, well, but it's radiating even when you're not using it. So she was like, oh my gosh, I had no idea. Like, she thought it was only radiating, the 10 minutes a day or whatever that they were using it. So that's like an easy one to just unplug things. Please discuss pulsation.
I think it was pulsation and modulation of the waves, right? Okay,
I don't see that, but I can talk about that.
Okay.
So when I talked about how these frequencies were artificial, made by humans, not natural to the environment, they're information carrying waves. One of the things that scientists are identifying as the reason why they can be more impactful than just these frequencies that have been around for a long time, or non-ionizing frequencies, is that they are modulated, that they pulse. So modulation is kind of like, it's the way the information is packaged on the wave. There are many different modulations depending on the antenna and the network. CDMA or GSM, you might hear about them. When you look up like frequencies or cell phone modulations, and this is changing, but I like to think of it like the way the information is packaged on the wave. And research has found that modulation is really important in the impact to people. So you can have a very low, actually a lower level of radiation, but some of the newer modulations can be associated with higher impacts. There's a study that Dr. Leonard Hardell looked at data that he did on people using cell phones and brain cancer, and found that the newer modulations, even though there was less radiation, had higher impacts. Dr. Igor Belyaev also talks about modulation as well, and there can be different modulations with the same frequency, but different effects in different cells. So I guess what I'm trying to say, there are a lot of, this isn't just about frequency, and it's not just about power level. We often say, oh, I want less radiation, right? I want to have less exposure. But that's just one piece of how you would describe an exposure that a person is getting, because there's different modulations, and there's also different, I'm different from the person next to me, so different people, different types of people being exposed, different characteristics of the wave, how fast the data, the pulse rate of the data is. Or with Wi-Fi, there was an interesting presentation at in Israel. We had a conference back in 2017 where there was a presentation on different modulations and different types of frequencies, and you could see what it looked like. And with Wi-Fi, for example, is very erratic. You can have like an intense pulses here, and it's a lot going on, and then it can be down low, and then intensing, and then down low. Quite an erratic signal, depending on what's happening in the room. So none of these issues are taken into account in our limits. The way the FCC measures this radiation is irrelevant to how people are affected, and frankly, fraudulent. Because like if I were to punch you, Lonnie, right now, and I broke your nose, this would be terrible. And you might be mad at me and say, well, you just punched me. And I would say, well, don't worry. I've now been with you for an hour and a half. Actually, oh my gosh, 2 hours.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh. and I'm going to average the power of my punch over the last 2 hours. So I really didn't really punch you, did I? If I averaged my punch over 2 hours, did I really punch you?
Did a tree fall in the forest?
What? So the way the FCC regulations are, they average the levels. So you can have these intense pulses, lower, and then they average everything. But how does averaging, does a cell care, a cell at the cellular level, the averaging is not adequate to imagine the impact. Another doctor presented it this way. It's like an orchestra. In an orchestra, you have all of these instruments. They're all working together beautifully. And each one has a role, like our body is like an orchestra. Well, imagine if there's something that's pulsing and constantly this wind or this constantly banging on the players, or even just one player in the corner. Over time, at first it's not a problem. No one will notice the impact to the music. But over time, people are going to be irritated who are playing, or there's going to be instruments that aren't playing on tune. People are going to notice that the sound is not the same. It's like that with our bodies. The constant pulsation, the constant exposure over time, it can have a huge impact, even if it's a light exposure. So any last questions? I didn't realize what time it was.
I didn't either, and I'm sorry I let you go over. I know your time is really crunched right now.
There was a more technical question that I can't answer because it's about, can a city require a telecommunications company to operate a cell antenna and to limit the power that the antenna uses to the minimum amount of power necessary to carry out the communication desired? I've heard different things on that, and I'm not going to have the expertise to specifically answer that. I know that there are cities that are trying to do that. I also know that in Connecticut, there is a city where, I think it's Warren, Connecticut, where they define, I'm kind of stepping to the side on this, but they define what coverage means. Defining power and the operations is an issue, and I'm very interested in following cases where this is moving forward. But to that very complicated question, I'm not going to be able to have the expertise to answer that, actually, because it requires a knowledge of law that
it keeps changing all the time.
Yeah, and it's kind of hard to know all the answers because we're not getting all the proper information, and even our municipal lawyers don't have all the information. So
that's very true. And that's why we're trying to educate our city and our city council and our planning department and everyone else so that they can help us to make our city better.
Do you want to add anything else about how people can get involved in Malibu and the name of your organization's website?
Well, we're Malibu for FOR, safetech.org. And we have links to EH Trust online. We have links to a lot of the other organizations online. We have a good resource page. We're happy to help answer questions. If you have them, please send them to us. If we can't answer them, we'll find someone who can. And I would look forward to having another webinar where we can answer some more questions. We didn't get to some of the basic ones that people asked today, but I think we covered most of them. I think if we didn't answer them, please send them to the Proton Mail, Malibu Safe Tech at protonmail.org. or .com, I'm sorry, Malibu for Safe Tech at protonmail.com. And we'll see if we can get those answered for you and send you back an answer.
Great, and I'm going to put...
Theodora, I'm so thankful that you've done this with us today. We're so grateful, really, to have your expertise. You're wonderful. And your organization is fantastic. You were one of the first ones that I went to when I started on my journey years ago.
Oh, thank you. I'm so thankful and that it's been helpful. That's our goal, is to help educate people and to also to publish research and educate policymakers. Please sign up for our newsletter to stay connected. We have a lot going on with the current lawsuit with the FCC. There's also another lawsuit that legal action that we've entered into with others in Lake Tahoe. And there's a press conference coming up on that. And I also would urge you, if you're interested and you're on this journey, on YouTube, we have a number of webinars that we've done that can be like only about 5G or all about policy, or kind of going in on how to address issues in the home. We also have PSAs, information on what's happening worldwide and so forth. So you can get educated on this, because I do think that it is important to learn more about this so you can, really be an effective change maker in your community, because it does require some education. Not as much as I think people need to go down, because I think we always know enough to know, but it is important to get educated, and thank you. And it's a journey. I'm always learning. I wish I knew more than I know. I'm learning every day.
So am I. So are we all. And there's so much to learn. And
yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And our website again is ehtrust.org. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Hello, my name is Frank Clegg, and I've spent over 40 years in the technology sector. My most recent position as a president of Microsoft Canada. In my career, I've seen the tremendous benefit that technology can provide. I've also seen the potential harm if technology is not implemented correctly. And I believe our current implementation of wireless technology is not safe. That's why I co-founded Canadians for Safe Technology, and why I joined the business advisory group of the Environmental Health Trust. I am especially concerned about our current implementation of 5G wireless technology. And the more research I do and the more experts I talk to, the more concerned I become. Now, there's no doubt that there are benefits such as autonomous vehicle and faster download speeds. At the same time, I think there is potential harm. I think it's important that we understand that 5G is not just an incremental number on our cell phones. In fact, over 230 scientists and researchers from 41 countries around the world have formally written to the United Nations, their member nations, and the World Health Organization, expressing their concern over the planned rollout of 5G technology, especially for vulnerable populations such as children, pregnant women, and the environmentally sensitive. They have been joined by state legislatures and federal regulators who have asked the FCC to provide evidence that there is no harm from the rollout of 5G technology. There's no doubt that the engineers and businesses and companies that roll out technology are well-meaning. However, their focus is on being first to market and getting new products into the market as efficiently and quickly as they can. I am not aware of any research or studies by my industry or related industry that deal at all with the health or safety effects of wireless technology. Here are some important facts about 5G. 5G technology has not been tested. I am not aware of a single study that shows that 5G technology is safe. 5G, as in all other wireless technology, gives off radio frequency radiation, which is absorbed in the human body and accumulates in the human body. One segment of 5G technology are millimeter waves. Millimeter waves are used by the US and Israeli government in their active denial systems, which are used for crowd control. And what they do is they provide a very painful reaction in the skin organs of the body. We have no idea what the impacts will be to human health if that kind of millimeter wave technology is used and we are exposed to it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There are significant proven health effects from wireless technology and wireless devices. These include insomnia, headaches, fatigue, heart palpitations, all caused by exposure to wireless devices and the radiation from them. More serious symptoms and conditions include heart arrhythmia, infertility, tinnitus, numbness or tingling in the extremities, diabetes, cancer, and permanent DNA damage. Mental health is also impacted, with increased anxiety, depression, rises in ADHD and autism, mood swings, and emotional instability. In fact, all of these health factors and conditions have risen exponentially over the last 30 years, and hundreds of studies that show proof of biological harm from wireless devices. Most recently, in 2018, the National Institute of Health's National Toxicology Program released the findings of a 14-year, $25 million study that showed clear evidence of harm in terms of cancer and permanent DNA damage. This study, several months later, was verified by the prestigious Ramazzini Institute out of Italy, which found the same results. Now you may ask how a product that has this potential harm could ever be released to the market and to the public for public use. Well, the way the process works is the FCC regulates all wireless devices and products associated with them. Unfortunately, the FCC is made up of previous telecom executives, lawyers, and engineers. It does not have any scientists or doctors that you would expect to be involved with the regulation of potentially harmful products. In fact, the FCC guidelines are 20 years out of date without any major significant improvement. Countries such as China, Russia, Italy, and Switzerland have safety guidelines that are 100 times safer for their citizens. The FCC guidelines are based on small, short-term, infrequent exposure. They do not worry about the accumulated effects for multiple devices. They don't measure or monitor exposure 24 hours a day or 7 days a week. And they have no special consideration for children, pregnant women, or those who have shown environmentally sensitivities to wireless radiation. In addition to the concerns about the guidelines, there is actually no oversight provided by the FCC, and in fact the telecommunications industry is self-policing. So what we are left with is almost a Wild West scenario where the regulations and the guidelines are significantly lacking and the industry is left to its own accord to roll this technology out to the marketplace. In addition to the concerns about the FCC guidelines themselves, the Federal Telecommunications Act of 1996 prohibits any telecommunication company to be sued on the basis of the safety or health of their products. So in other words, there is no liability to the telecommunications industry of any of the impacts of their products. Just last week, the reinsurer Swiss Re came out with their annual forecast, and they specifically identified 5G technology as an upcoming insurable health concern globally over the next 3 years. There is also mounting evidence that the telecommunications industry knew about the potential impacts of RF radiation years ago. And in fact, we're starting to see some of the behavior from my industry similar to what the tobacco industry did over the last few decades. The telecommunications industry has over 500 lobbyists working in Congress and other areas of legislature protecting the industry. Together, all of these issues that I've referenced, plus the general lack of awareness in the general public, have led us to the situation where we are today. So where are we today? Today we currently have a significant amount of exposure in our homes, in our businesses, in our schools, and in most public areas we go to. Cisco has announced and predicted by 2030 there will be over 500 billion wirelessly connected devices in the world. That works out to be almost 60 devices for every person on the planet. Many states and cities around the world are debating and passing legislation about the rollout of 5G technology. And in fact, what we're seeing in the US is at the federal and the state level, they're fast-tracking some of this legislation to support the rollout of 5G infrastructure. Unfortunately, this legislation seems to be taking away all individual rights and the rights of local towns and counties and cities and passing more power to the telecommunication companies. We believe this is a historic and precedent-setting power shift from the individual and state and local level over to an industry. In fact, many communities in the US and around the world are passing moratoriums preventing the rollout of 5G technology until it is proven safe. 5G will impact you personally. There are designs that show the requirement for small cell 5G antennas as close as every third house in the neighborhood and could be as close as every 500 feet in public areas. The impact of that radiation at that level of frequency and intensity and power, 24 hours a day and 7 days a week, is unprecedented and is not understood. I've spent the last 5 years of my life, I've had the opportunity to meet with experts on a worldwide basis who have spent their careers studying the impact of wireless radiation and devices. I've also had the opportunity to meet with some of the great minds in the technology sector who have helped create these tremendous products that we use in our lives and provide tremendous benefit to us. I am convinced that there are safer alternatives available so we can have the best of both worlds. Technology that can provide the tremendous benefits, but technology that is safe. There is no incentive or motivation to provide the research and the funding to look for safer alternatives. So that's why it's up to us to help encourage that investment. That can be by asking our legislators to pass legislation, encouraging the industry to do it, or it can be by us directly trying to advocate for change in the industry to allow them to become more responsible to provide safer technology that still provides tremendous benefit. We can't do this all on our own. We need your help. Here's what you can do. The most important thing is to get educated. We have provided a little bit of an overview and some of the scientific evidence that shows there's a potential harm. But now you have to take the initiative. There are some tremendous websites, Canadians for Safe Technology, the Environmental Health Trust, saferemr.com, and the Physicians for Safe Technology. There are also other resources that are listed at the end of this video. We encourage you to spread the word, share this information, share the video with your coworkers, with your family, with your friends, with legislators at the state and federal level. Even your local school boards can have an impact if they choose to engage. Ultimately, your knowledge is in your power, and your power is in your hands. I fundamentally believe we can have the best of both worlds. That is access to the technology and the tremendous benefits it provides, but in a safe manner. We are advocates for safe technology, not no technology. I thank you for your time.